joining in to the fourth chapter of our series of conversations on generative AI today. I have very special guests today, but before I introduce them, I just thought we'll set the context, talk a little about what this is all about, all these conversations, and then we'll dive right in. For people who attended some of the earlier ones, just it might be a bit of a repetition, but this is a community initiative. There's a generative AI community which has taken a life of its own, and we started these conversations as a part of an overall community initiative. With different names for it, but it's kind of started getting called the Afraid to Ask Fireside Chats. The last Afraid to Ask, which was chapter 3, 15 days back, was with Praveen Someshwar, who's the Group Managing Director of Hindustan Times Publications. And we spoke about the effect of generative AI on media and creative industries and entertainment. Today, chapter 4 is especially interesting, especially for the people joining in who are from India. And the reason for this interesting one today is that we are today focusing on how generative AI will impact, disrupt, enhance IT and IT services, something in which India is a powerhouse on. Before I get to introduce my two special guests, I just wanted to say couple of things. Conversation is encouraged, but at the end, use the chat icon, which I think you'll be able to see. I also did want to say that we're using a new software today so that it could stream on multiple channels of all our participants. So there could be some glitches. I'd seek your forgiveness in advance for that. And we'd love to see some of you as we kind of open out for Q&A going further. So just before we move to the next, I wanted to introduce my guest. So what we will talk about today, as I said, is what would generative AI do to IT products and services. I would like to welcome and thank Sindhu Gangadharan. She is the SVP and MD, SAP Labs India, Head of SAP User and Enablement globally. For people who follow news in IT, news in tech in India, Sindhu will be quite a familiar face. And besides being a leader in tech, a woman leader in tech, she's also serves on the board of multiple organizations, of Siemens, of Titan, which I have a very fond remembrance of. Sindhu will talk about that later. And she's also represents the industry, where she's been re-elected to the NASSCOM Executive Council for the third consecutive term. A lot of work in Indo-German bilateral trade relations. Lots more I can speak about, given her sterling accomplishments and resume. But let me move to the second guest, and that's my friend Jagdish Mitra, who is the Chief Strategy Officer and Head of Growth at Tech Mahindra. Welcome, Jagdish. He's joining us from the East Coast. Jagdish anyway doesn't sleep, so it doesn't matter to him. And Sindhu, by the way, is also joining us somewhere halfway to a company offsite, and she's kind of stopped on the way to do this. So thank you very much, both of you, for kind of joining in from these locations. Back to Jagdish. He's also a part of the NASSCOM Executive Council and therefore represents the industry, chairs a lot of industry initiatives with FICCI, as you can see, with CII. And before this, he was the CEO of Canvas M. I think that's around the time when Jagdish and I started, interacting with each other. I also would like to tell you that every year Airtel does it audits and finds out who are its 3 biggest revenue providers in India, and Jagdish kind of ranks amongst the top 3 all the time because he's always on the phone. We are always on the phone. That's how I know Jagdish. But anyway, so that's about Jagdish and Sindhu today. Thank you very much for coming in, and great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Lovely. So, as I start, I wanted to actually show a particular quote, which I really like and I use very often. This is by Kent Beck. Kent Beck is one of the one of the legendary software engineers, software programmers. He wrote a book called Extreme Programming, which has become a practice today. And he put out this tweet maybe a month back, where he said that I've been reluctant to try ChatGPT. Today, I got over the reluctance. Now I understand why I was reluctant. The value of 90% of my skills just dropped to $0, but the leverage of the remaining 10% went up 1000x. I need to recalibrate. And this kind of sets the tone for my first question to you, Sindhu and Jagdish. It's ironical almost that this creation, generative AI, GPT, Chat GPT, ironically has probably impacted its creators the most. Which is the tech industry and the IT industry, and there's a lot of apprehension, sometimes even fear out there that suddenly we won't need as many IT engineers, software engineers, programmers, coders, because GitHub Copilot, etc., can do a lot of this work anyway. So I wanted to start with this little provocative. I wanted to throw this little provocative thing to you, and maybe we'll start with you, Sindhu. What do you think? And I would love to know from you, Jagdish, after that, what your view is on Kent Beck's quote and this disruption of tech by ChatGPT.
Yeah, sure, Jaspreet. I mean, I think we'd all agree with what Ken says to a certain extent, right? Because if you just look at generative AI models like OpenAI's GPT-3, or for that matter, Dolly, I mean, clearly, right? It's showcased in terms of the potential in understanding natural language, even generating high quality images, writing code based on very simple descriptions like what Kent is talking about. And these AI models, of course, continue to evolve at a really exponential pace, and also their proficiency in generating code clearly will only increase. There's no doubt about it. And what that results in is, of course, reducing the need for human programmers to perform routine coding tasks, right? So I don't think it's developers, I mean, are kind of not needed or anything like that. But for instance, AI still might not be able to do performant coding, right? Because as the AI models are pretty much general purpose systems. So if you ask me, Jaspreet, it becomes key for developers to also understand the end-to-end stack, right? Right from the application layer to the OS, all the related constructs like the VMs, the containers, the hypervisor, and also understand what it means to run performant, but most importantly, also secure applications. And I think I'd underline both these words, performance and security, in these environments. So the routine coding tasks, of course, can become the terrain in which AI will contribute big time. But at the same time, it calls for our developers to upskill themselves and also raise the level of their game when it comes to coding, right? Because, like I said, as AI takes over these routine tasks, programmers also need to get into more the domain specific aspects, right? And allow to go into very particular intricacies of a particular industry or a problem, and kind of leverage effective AI driven solutions. And so that strong foundational knowledge in AI and machine learning is clearly the, a must have. But it's also about working alongside these AI systems and benefit from it. So I'd say in the end, Gen AI is definitely here to augment, but definitely also not here to replace our developers and programmers.
So not replace, but certainly recalibrate in some sense. That's what Kent
Recalibrate
Beck
and
was
yeah,
showing.
yeah.
So, Jagdish, do you think this is the death of the developer?
First of all, thank you. I know between east coast of the US and the traveling coasts of Sindhu, we've captured generative AI pretty much across the world. I think one of the things that I'm waiting for is how will Gen AI or generative AI impact panelists like us? Will they be able to help us answer these questions before we are thinking of answering them? That's the day I'm waiting for, to see how will it augment my answering capability. But onto your question about death, I think both Ken and what Sindhu talked about, I don't think, I mean, every time there is a new technology, and I know generative AI, I personally have gone on record as saying probably the next biggest thing after internet in the world of computing is very different. But if you look at what a developer's life cycle works, it's very similar to what Sindhu was talking. And I think all of us, including bad programmers like me, have had the chance of going through the whole life cycle. So when you do a put the full scale system development life cycle and go through the design, the architecture, then the coding of it, and so on and so forth, there are pieces of it, if I remember, which probably can be taken over by Gen AI tools like Copilot, etc., which will help you in augmenting it. So to me, it's a great tool to reduce the time and also make sure that some of the errors we make on a regular basis go out of the way. So we are able to pass it on and make sure that part of it is done. But remember, there's a developer's life. There are many, many roles that he plays in the whole journey, including conceptualizing the architecture, writing the flow of the program or the software, then coding it, then testing it, and then making sure that it is doing the right, like Sindhu talked about, the domain element and so on and so forth. So there is that role of the developer, which is conceptualizing, designing, and also coming together in terms of the architecture part. That won't change. One of the big things that we are all talking about, and that's where I think the generative AI developers will have to play a big role, Jaspreet, is the issue that will definitely come across as the usage of Gen AI in a trust manner.
Mhm.
How will you make sure that you're actually enabling it for trust? How do you making sure that it is being used for ethical usage? And we all represent fairly large size IT and tech companies. They will have to play a big role for the developers to be educated that when you are using the tools, whether it is any of the tools that we talked about, how do we make sure they're being used ethically? That role will always remain with a developer. Otherwise, it'll not exactly work the way we want it to.
Fantastic. I think the way generative AI can help augment Jagdish is that, rather than waking up at 6:30 a.m. there to be a part of the panel, maybe you could have had your avatar there, here, okay, sipping coffee from time to time, and we would never have known that this is not Jagdish. But thank you very much. And that both of you, something that you said, kind of has led me to still talking about developers, their skills, IT, therefore, and we'll move to the industry right after this question. But I just wanted to share another slide here and another tweet, this time by another famous person called Jaspreet Bindra, okay, which was on top of a Rob Lennon tweet. By the way, there's an AI whisperer, it seems, along with the tech whisperer. And so the AI whisperer talked about the fact that the coolest new programming language is English. And when we were growing up, Jagdish and Sindhu, for us, English was the passport to success. We all children had to learn English. If you didn't know English, then you wouldn't go ahead in your career, English medium, etc., etc. And then our kids, so that generation, uh, suddenly every parent started thinking that my kid needs to learn how to code Python or do JavaScript or having, so there are like these 8-year-old kids going and learning stuff, and there's Python happening with 12-year-olds, etc., etc., and everyone is very happy. Websites are being made at home, etc. And now suddenly what seems to be happening is that, look, now maybe GitHub Copilot can do that work of actual coding. And we've seen a lot of those demos. And what you need is actually good English, good language again. And so the famous person Jaspreet Bindra wrote about the fact that yesterday coding was the new English. Okay, but now suddenly English is the new coding. Do you believe that? Do you think we are kind of moving really to natural language? And maybe we'll start with you, Jagdish, this time. Okay, and coding skills in many ways will become obsolete.
Well, as we said in the previous conversation, Jaspreet, the coding skills will get augmented. You will get a set of skills that will help you do things faster. You'll probably move out of the mundane stuff very, very quickly and make sure that you're able to. I love the analogy he drew up, and I think it's not just the developers. I think it's everyone. in the
Hmm.
organization who will probably have to learn to live and augment their skills. You used a simple term of reinventing or recalibrating. I think that's what's going to happen across the board for everyone. And I don't think it's limited to tech organizations. I don't think it's limited to any organization of a particular industry. It's going to go across. Every manager, every team leader will need to know how to leverage these tools and be more proficient at their job. Coming to your question about natural language and usage of English, you're absolutely right. Because the focus should change for the developer in terms of wanting to make sure what will be the concept of what you're developing, what will be the architecture of what you're developing, what will be the outcome of what you're trying to develop, and how do you do it. And that's where, the we've always used, when we've written down, if you remember in our times, the pseudocode, or before that, the ability for us to be able to write down stuff in simple flow in terms of English, the days of writing flowchart, etc., was also based on writing down simple English. Now that what you're doing is you're reducing the gap from those stages of writing English to getting the code, that's getting compressed. But I have a question. I rather would love to hear views from people, because I think one way, I'm hoping that people are not taking English as we understand English. It's more natural language, is what I think is the focus should be. And some of my colleagues in our labs in Techem, I had to bundle in one little bit of jingle about Techem, so give me this 2 seconds of that. We created a language called BHAML, which is Bharat language, Bharat markup language. It's meant to start having people code on their specific languages, where they come from. Could be someone who's writing, speaking in Kannada, or someone who's speaking in Bengali should be able to code that into a Python code very easily from having scripted it. So gone should go away. The days should go away where people were told that if you are good at actually studying in English and reading in English, that's the only way to get to a software job or a software code. I'm hoping that will go away. Natural language will take precedence, but will not necessarily mean quote unquote English.
Lovely, thank you. And Sindhu, obviously, want to really get your views on the same thing, and I also want you to focus on the right hand side of this slide, which basically says that copying and pasting might become probably the most important skill. Okay. Do you think that again, I'm being a little facetious, being a little provocative here, so as to get those responses from you. But what is your view on this
No,
English being the new coding?
I think I fully agree with what Jagdish was saying earlier, right? Because and even before I comment on that, I think English as a skill is always needed, irrespective of the topic that we are talking about, Jaspreet. But English in the context of natural language and how generative AI can use it. I mean, clearly, right, to the earlier point as well, that we both talked about, AI is here to augment our development work, right? And if you're looking at English in the context of prompt engineering, I mean, here again, it's just there to enhance software engineering, right? I mean, so we'd be bringing in more of prompt engineering if you're looking at areas like, if you want to increase efficiency, or if you want to look at enhanced personalization, or to Jagdish's point on ethical and responsible use of AI, right? So, what do I mean by increased efficiency? For instance, you can use prompt engineering to generate very specific language output very quickly, right, and accurately, like to any language, streamlining all the operations in between and reducing time that you would have otherwise spent on those tasks. Or when you look at personalization by generating language outputs that speak directly to a customer's needs and preferences, so kind of what Jaspreet, the tone that you want to hear, right? So businesses can actually provide that very personalized experience that helps them in building that trust and keeping your customers and that loyalty with customers. Or when you go to ethical and responsible use of AI, I think this is very important, right? Because prompt engineering becomes quite crucial in guiding those language models towards producing very trustworthy, ethical, and value aligned outputs, right? So yes, it's important to understand how to use it. There's no doubt about it, and you have to also carefully craft the input that you give to the language models, right? And but the power of that is reap when organizations can ensure that the technology is used very responsibly and very ethically. Now, another way to look at prompt engineering is, I mean, it could be a temporary fad, but as we evolve, right, machines also become smart enough to provide us different prompts for the tasks that we intend to do, right? So that's also happening, and we're already seeing a lot around prompt databases and marketplaces, which is emerging very quickly. So I'd say yes, to understand how this works in the background is very important for a software engineer to effectively use it for those for the right business outcomes. No?
So no, that's I tend to agree. I think more human skills will become more important. Okay, and in some sense, it makes me very glad because I can't program, and I've tried, and I've never learned, and therefore I can possibly create stuff without learning how to, at least simple stuff. I also think it's a good thing because now, one of the things which I've always believed in the tech industry, IT industry, is that it has been dominated by technologists and IT people. Okay, and I think if we probably will see a little bit more diversity from language people coming in, humanities people coming in, sociologists coming in, etc., and hopefully create a much better AI for all, truly AI for all as we go forward. That actually leads me to the next question, which where I move from individual software developers to the Indian IT tech industry. And here I wanted to show you another tweet. Yeah, and this was a reply to me, which very pleasantly surprised me. We kind of talk about generative AI will do this and it will improve productivity, efficiency, etc. And I tweeted something when GPT-4 was launched, ChatGPT Plus was launched, and Vishnu actually replied back saying that it is actually $20 per month is actually making us write code 200% faster, and we are shipping fast. And so it seems that at various levels of the industry we are actually seeing this happen. Now I know it's just one sample, but if I was to kind of extrapolate this, India is known to be an IT powerhouse. Over the past couple of decades, companies like yours have helped make that an IT powerhouse. Millions of great engineers, great talent. What I wanted to ask you was that as this very fundamental new technology, as Jagdish was saying, as big as the internet, etc., kind of comes in, Sindhu, how do you see specifically, if I was to leave services for Jagdish, okay,
Mhm.
how do you see specifically, product development, new products, your part of tech in a sense, getting impacted positively, negatively, or no impact?
No, I think all in all, very positive, I'd say, Jaspreet, because there's absolutely no doubt that India will be a very significant key player in this whole space. There's no doubt about that, right? I mean, this is already happening. In fact, if you just look around, we are seeing a whole new generation of Indian entrepreneurs who are totally capitalizing on this enthusiasm and this surrounding narrative around generative AI, right? And it's not just enthusiasm. We're talking about a lot of new ideas coming up. Many finance firms who have begun using generative AI to create and kind of use data for training machine learning models that can very quickly detect fraud more accurately, right? Very much needed. And also very quickly analyze kind of key market trends, make those investment decisions, help manage risks in the finance space. Also helping them very quickly detect if there are any fraudulent transactions that have happened, right? And also identify potential trading opportunities. So whole space in the sense what was kind of application driven. I mean, leveraging the technology today to very quickly go through those anomalies and get to those target outcomes. Or if you look at gaming and entertainment, right? Again, there's huge usage of generative AI to make virtual worlds, game content, and even improve the performance of the game characters, right? Or if I just reflect back at home at SAP, a significant portion of our AI team actually sits out of India, right? SAP labs in India. And we've also laid out a complete roadmap when it comes how we are leveraging Gen AI for many of our use cases. In fact, some of the top use cases that come to my mind, Jaspreet, like for example, expediting your freight verification, right, and the entire documentation around that, or for that matter, a use case in success factors. We're creating very success factors, by the way, is our human experience
Yeah,
management solution,
yeah.
creating very compelling job descriptions, interview questions, or even for that matter, generating ready to use process models, because we are looking at very complex process models across customers' um, deployments, heterogeneous deployments, and very quickly to analyze those process models and come up with KPI recommendations, right, for them. Or even for that matter, enhancing the employee and customer experience and getting insights faster using natural language. So, lots of interesting use cases across the various domains. And what we are also seeing is a lot of industry partnerships, because we are only going to succeed if we collaborate and work together. For example, SAP has partnered with Microsoft
Yes,
on
I saw that.
saw that, right? Yeah. So a lot of things. I mean, last month also Microsoft released their generative AI driven platform and chatbot in India, right, called Jugalbandi, which
Yes.
allows users to have easier access to information on government initiatives and public programs. So yeah, lots happening, and like I said at the beginning, India playing a very key role around that. So if you ask me, AI is kind of the even kinetic enabler of the digital economy and the innovation ecosystem. And totally, India is at the cusp of the whole generative AI revolution, Jaspreet.
Great. In fact, in the next couple of episodes, we are going to get the Jugalbandi
Ah,
creators in, and would love to have a conversation with them. Just before I come to you, Jagdish, I just wanted to kind of remind people who are viewing here, if you can have your questions, comments on, depending on which medium you are, on the chat part, so we can see that as we kind of get into Q&A. But Jagdish, so do you think, from a services viewpoint, do you think this is the next Y2K moment in a sense for Indian IT services, or even bigger, or a damn squid?
Um, I think definitely not a damn squib. You can tell from the conversation that's going on. I think there's I haven't seen more chatter on one topic than on generative AI. I think the challenge is that we should probably be able to listen. Chatter has also has a trending or a capability of making a lot of noise, but not necessarily an effective. So people's choice of what they're listening to and how they are reacting will define it. But I have gone on record as saying that I think it's the next big thing after internet for the tech world, only because I feel that it can absolutely transform the way technology is used. You talked about it. I think Sindhu mentioned it. The fact that I think it will now bring in a whole larger level of participation. I think that's the big opportunity. Even companies like us, I think, will start looking at people more from not just a computer science background, but come from social studies or humanities backgrounds. This is the true coming together of the left and the right brain. And I think that's an opportunity that we have to nurture. So from my perspective, from the IT services industry, obviously, it's been a powerhouse for India. We've all played different roles in NASCOM, for example. We all come together, which is a very unique organization where all competitors come together and try and shape the future. And I think this has been a topic that we've been talking about, saying how do we make effective use of it. Now, like every new technology, Jaspreet, companies and organizations, especially in this case of Gen AI, will either lead or lose.
Yes.
There is no status quo. So you can't maintain that I'm going to stay at this level and that's going to be okay. It's just that I think it will improve. It will increase the competitive index, if there is one, something like that, between us and our peer groups, between us and our partners like whether it's SAP, Microsoft, Oracle, Google Cloud, all of these AWSs, everyone else of the world, service nows of the world, and so on and so forth. How do we make sure we make the companies like system integrators like us will only be successful if they are able to do this faster, better, without any errors into place, and constantly leverage to add a layer of value on top of it. For example, if you're building an application in the ERP space, I mean ERP, because both me and Sindhu have a connect there. The point I'm trying to make is you will probably be able to do the whole supply chain in that whole process, or the accounting process, much effective, not only faster, but you're predicting what could be the scenarios that are likely to be looked at. So the user on the other hand, on supply chain, is already aware of these 20 use cases, because that's where ChatGPT can look at this, guys. At the end of it, for generative AI to be successful, there's got to be huge amount of database. Your LLMs need to be in place. If you've got to make that work, then that database has got to be built, and then people will come in. As far as our industry and our developers are concerned, it's nothing. I mean, to one end, it's not very new. Over the journey, we've learned from different languages, different databases, different technologies, and India has still maintained its cutting edge on that. Indian skills and Indian developers have, moved on from relational database packages to, all sorts of technologies and the new skills that we could pick up, to native cloud development, etc., etc. So companies and developers will probably see one huge change: the whole culture of learning. And the
Hmm.
learning culture will go through a huge change, and it will if the gap was this much, if you were not learning versus you're slow in learning, it's true for, again, I believe, for leaders as well as for developers, that gap will increase, significantly increase. So if you are not pushing your organization, or not pushing individually yourselves to go into a more learning culture, and the organization is not changing that, then you have something to worry about, because you will probably not exist as an
Yeah,
organization. So there is
yeah, yeah. Sorry.
so there is, I'm not trying to fear monger, but I tweeted about this just in preparation of this, of saying, do you think people will be a co-worker, or generative AI will be your manager? There are
I'm going to
15%
ask you that
people.
question, so don't steal my thunder there. Okay,
Okay.
that's my last question. Okay, borrowed
Okay.
from your tweet. But just what you were saying, I teach at Ashoka University, and in fact, my next term I'm going to be teaching generative AI. And Ashoka University, as you know, is a very humanities-led university. Now they have the sciences. There are no computer engineers there. Well, there are, but there are very few. And I can see the excitement in art students, humanities students, okay, economic students, sociology students, because now they can actually access this world and actually produce stuff, generate stuff in this world which was barred from them, because they had to learn an arcane methodology, arcane languages, and there was this barrier, therefore. And I personally do think that, and I agree with what both of you are saying, that, this would serve to democratize. In fact, it will vastly increase the talent pool amongst the, even the non-engineers in India, and beyond just the cities, as we get more and more into languages, in vernacular languages in generative AI. I'm fond of saying that it's not generative AI, which will take your job away, but a person knowing that might take your job away, right? And so you better be the person who knows that, rather than the person who kind of the replacer rather than the replacee. And that's why, for certain people, as you said, Jagdish, it's a great opportunity, but for certain people, it could mean that they might not exist any longer, from a entity standpoint. Okay, what I'm going to do is, I actually had another question, but I'm going to skip that. Okay, I will move to one last provocative question at the end, which is the one I did not allow you to ask, Jagdish. But before that, since there are now a few questions and we have about 10 odd more minutes left, let me choose a couple. And my request to both of you, Sindhu and Jagdish, would be if you could keep the answers as short as possible, so that we can go through as many questions. I'll also try and shorten some of the questions. Um, so Sandeep is asking that from an ITES perspective, uh, and the way customers are requesting use of Gen AI. He's saying that, look, what are the people, technology, and more importantly, contractual obligations and ramifications when you sign contracts? Also, add the legal aspects of it. It seems a bit complicated as of now. Any thoughts? I don't have any thoughts. I don't know if you have any thoughts. Otherwise, so he's saying that, look, there seem to be some legal contractual
Well,
issues.
I
Is
mean,
that
I don't know, but I'd just say, I mean, AI is already being used. I mean, even before the Gen AI piece came in, right? It's
Mm,
already quite prominently used for customer service and support, right? Because it's you can generate
mm.
human-like responses very quickly and accurately to a wide range of customer inquiries and very nuanced questions, right? So in that sense, I mean, whatever contractual obligations you have, I believe that even now it's even better that you can have a 24 by 7 customer service and support, even reducing the need for human agents and even increasing efficiency, right? So in that sense,
Yeah,
so
and maybe someone generating contracts also for you.
possibly, but you better want to check that, right? If it's
Yeah, yeah. There's
mindful.
been this recent, yeah, there was this recent instance. I don't know if you read that, where this lawyer used Chat GPT to generate a legal case for someone who sued an airline on something, and it turned out that the judge found that all the citations were wrong. They didn't
Oh
exist.
wow.
GPT had hallucinated all the caseloads. And so his case was thrown out, and this guy had to write an apology saying that I actually used ChatGPT and never checked. Okay, so I think some of that is also happening. Jagdish, and maybe you also, Sindhu, after that. Krishnan is asking a question which is on everyone's mind, which is any thoughts on how business leaders can put the right guardrails on responsible use of AI? I think I'm sure it plays on your mind as we speak. So, Jagdish, anything?
Well, I think I referred to NASCOM in our conversation there, and it's the same thing that we've discussed at length, saying what are those guardrails? Because strongly feel, and I think we've talked about it, and I strongly feel that the worst thing to do would be to stop
Yeah.
and
Mm,
stop doing research. There's been huge conversation here in the US or in India of whether we should probably stop the research around this. And I think my only point to people have been that when disruptive technologies that have both good and bad, which is by definition disruption means, whether it's nuclear or DNA cloning, have come, these conversations have happened, these topics have risen up. And I think the only difference this time is for a nuclear discussion to have, you need to have enough infrastructure, you need to have a reactor, you need to have A, B, C, D stuff to do it. Same for DNA cloning as well. This could be one small village in Madhya Pradesh with four people who know robotics to develop something. Whom will you stop? So there is no such topic thing that's ever going to work, is my strong feel, and I think that's what we as an industry feel. All we can do is to raise awareness levels very high of what is
mm,
good, what is bad, and build. It's almost like, to certain extent, a statutory warning on cigarette smokers packets. But similar to that, companies like us will have to make sure that they demonstrate that work. There is no, we'll have to probably make sure that we are using ethically AI use software. We are using developing tools and have, as I said in the beginning, we agreed the role of the developer, and to put up a badge saying I am an ethical AI developer because I follow these principles. And that's the guardrail. Because I think, how else will you we all talked about, right, the fact that you could have a social scientist do this.
yeah,
Whom will
yeah.
you monitor?
So I will stop you here because you've asked question, who will do this? Whom will you monitor? Sindhu, who will do this? Whom will you monitor?
No, I
So
mean,
I mean, your views on this, yeah.
yeah, I mean, just to even add to what Jagdish said, right? When you're talking about usage of AI for some very critical infrastructure use case, think about your monitoring your city's traffic flows using AI, right? I mean, so it can be life and death. So having a very broad legal and regulatory framework based on the whole technology architecture for AI is a must have, just like Jagdish said, right? So also making sure that various regulatory responsibilities based on the different actors who come in, based on their roles, and different aspects of how the technology is being used, I think it's absolutely non-negotiable, depending on the kind of use cases we have put. The customer use cases that we talked about earlier on are the easy ones, right? But when it gets to more complex cases where life is involved, I think that's when we need to be very, very careful.
Yeah, in fact, in one of my avatars, not AI generated avatars, human avatar, I am in my old age doing my second master's in AI and ethics from Cambridge University. And we started this 2 years back, almost 2 years back. There was no generative AI. I mean, there was, but it wasn't out in the wild, it wasn't out in the open. And even then, we used to say that, and it's one of the first, probably, major university led AI ethics masters. And all the literature surveys basically led us to believe that the horse has left the stable in a sense. And then generative AI kind of burst into the scene, and we couldn't even see the horse. And there's so much because the technology is moving so fast. There are many things happening. I mean, one of the things, to what you said, Jagdish, that batch of I am an ethical AI developer. I mean, I foresee a time when possibly there'll be an AI Hippocratic oath, like it's there in the medical profession. The medical profession is the only profession which builds in ethics into the whole curriculum, in a sense, and education. And so, first, do no harm. That's how you'll have to kind of act. There are certain countries in the world which have started teaching children as young as sixth grade, seventh grade, and onwards, on how to differentiate between fake news and real news, generated
Absolutely.
content and not generated content. And I think, among many things, as it kind of gets more and more democratized. I mean, obviously, my last paper at Cambridge, in fact, my last term paper was about this nuclear energy thing. Should we have an IAEA for AI? And with all the problems associated with, should there be an FDA for AI? Okay, so that so I think in the latest G7 thing at Hiroshima, very tellingly at Hiroshima, there were just three topics discussed: Ukraine, China, and AI. And so I think this responsible AI and the ethics around AI has become a topic of conversation across the world.
Yeah.
I am going to have one last question from the audience, which I will just say out for a quick answer, and then I'll ask you the lastest question, Jagdish, and then we will close. Okay, but one of the questions basically asks that, look, have you seen, has generative AI and AI and generative AI helped you enhance the creative talent in your organization? Have you kind of see, we hear about that. Have you seen that yet, or it's too early? Any of you want to take this?
No, I was recently, I mean, one is in the organization, but I was recently talking to a journalist from one of the leading media houses in India, actually, right? And he's doing his PhD on, I mean, he said he wanted to keep abreast, and his entire thesis, he ran it through ChatGPT, right? And also Bard, by the way. And he was saying,
Gives me ideas, huh, Sindhu? Giving me
no, no, but
ideas.
he wrote it first. He said he wanted to check how close it would come. And he was pretty impressed, and he's not got a tech background, to our earlier discussion. And so he's purely in the journalistics, or in the space of journalism. So again, just to quote on the fact that yes, it's actually being put to use, and also in the organization, to my earlier point, what I made, Jaspreet, on making also job descriptions that we put out there, right? To also take out any kind of gender biases that could pop up from a human generated job description. For us, this is even built into our core of our product, right? The success factors product that I mentioned earlier on. Because for many times when we talk about certain issues which or a stance that we take, we truly believe that technology can really help it scale and make it kind of all permeating, irrespective of who's using it, right? And that's a classical example of it. But yes, there are many such also in the customer support responses, to make it a
Sure.
lot more effective, where we're using kind of large language models to scan through different sources from which a similar kind of question might have come up from different sources, and kind of generate the best possible response for the customer. Again, um, yeah, can go on and on, but you said keep it short.
Yes. Thanks, Sindhu. Thanks, Jagdish. Any quick one from you?
Well, would tend to agree with it in terms of the fact that the opportunity for creativity is going to tremendously go up. Right now, the creativity is about creative use cases. People come up with strange ideas and say, "I can't chat GPT do this." So I said, "Okay, maybe they won't be able to feed you yet. It won't be able to help you with hunger or any of those things at the moment." But people have stretching their boundaries of imagination, which is good thing, I think, because to me, from there comes the ideas of sifting through ideas and finally something that will probably work out, that you can think about, which is probably effective. So the first thing people are starting to do, which is I think the first step, is imagine what chat gpt or a create generative AI or any such tool like GPT-4 can do, right? So people are saying that there's a whole world of opportunities that exist, and can this do this? I just was meeting with a colleague and a friend here who works for a hedge fund in Wall Street, and he was telling us that his bosses have now come back after meetings of whatever they did and said, "Oh, why are we not doing ABCDT? I think generative AI can do this." So these buggers all looked at each other and said, "Really? I mean, how does this happen?" So, but people are at least pushing the boundaries. So that's the first step on creative. In our organization, I think we've started to see a lot more towards productivity and developmental related questions that people keep asking, and that's a good thing. I think we are challenging the boundaries.
Yeah,
That's the first step
yeah.
of doing anything creative.
In fact, I wish I could just pull that up and show you right now. I tweeted something today morning, which was I call it reverse creativity. Okay, where it's a construction firm and they need workers. Okay, construction workers and half-made building, and there's this giant hoarding which they have kind of built outside the building saying, "Join us. ChatGPT will never be able to replace you." Okay, this job. Okay, and so it's kind of the reverse of, but it's very creative. Okay, I think we are kind of closing. Thank you. We're closing to the end. So let me just ask that one question which you had, and I took out a graphic. Jagdish, I was thinking of you when I got this graphic out, but Jagdish tweeted.
Where were you thinking of me? The one with the whip or the one who's getting whipped?
Well, we shall leave
Ah,
that for a post webinar discussion. But here is where I'm looking for, like, at max 5-10 word answer to the tweet that you had, Jagdish. But since it was your tweet, we'll ask Sindhu first. Okay, that that do you think in 3 to 5 years' time a humanoid or a non-human or a semi-human actor could be either your boss or your coworker, or it's too early?
yeah, I think this whole humanoids is becoming common term, right? Since Elon Musk's Tesla is preparing to roll out, I think next year, right?
Neuralink,
It's
Neuralink, yeah.
yeah. But today, if I just look at the look around, Jaspreet, the data to train such humanoids is pretty scarce, right? And we really need quite innovative approaches, like can a humanoid learn by just watching a video or a task like how we do, right? Or does it really need that experience to be in the world to iteratively build that model within itself? So I'd say we are still far from humanoids in terms of what can, yeah, whether they can do the work of a software manager or an architect. But having said that, yes, over a period of time, it could become a reality. The question that we always
Now you're
ask.
acting like that hedge fund manager. You're hedging, okay? That
Okay, I think
Jagdish.
the question is whether a software developer will report to a humanoid or it's a humanoid doing software development reporting back to the humanoid itself. No.
Okay. You've just made it more complicated.
Yeah.
Jagdish, since it was your tweet, okay, what do you think?
Well, as like most people, our imaginations can run wild, and we can start imagining a whole lot of the world. Um, but I think humans being asked to be worked with a humanoid uh, is a little challenging, because logically, I think if the humans are doing stuff that the humanoids are managing on, then why aren't humanoids doing that? So we so
No,
so
no, 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 no. So, this is like that, Humphrey of Yes Minister. Okay, where you ask, yeah, you kind of keep on like going round and round until
so
that I'm
see,
that minister who does not able to understand. So I'm going
so
to
the,
ask like the minister asked. Do you think is that a yes or a no?
I think it's a no. I
Yeah.
think it's
Okay,
a no.
good. Okay, fine. I think,
It's not
yeah,
going to happen
I'm
that
not
way.
looking for an explanation. Don't worry. Okay, so, well, I also personally think it's a no. I think these are, imaginative, but maybe if the time frame was different, we could be talking different things. But great. Thank you very much, both of you. I'm aware that, you are beginning your day, Jagdish and Sindhu. You have to now sit in a car and continue the rest of your journey, probably. Thank you so much for coming in. The key message that I take out from this is that, look, I think it is individual centric, it is company centric, but if you kind of put your mind to it, this is something that you can use to only increase, enhance, both from your industry, your company, and yourself. In fact, I also believe so. I believe that the appetite for software in this world is infinite, literally infinite, as it runs the world. Yeah, and in fact, if you go to any company and the if you ask what is the bottleneck for a project running slow or not running on time, the answer 9 times out of 10 is that the tech is not ready. The IT,
Mm.
is kind of whatever. So actually, there's a 10x, 100x need for more and more and more tech, more and more software. And I think therefore it's not about each software engineer becoming a 10x guy, and therefore we needing 1/10 of the people. Okay, it's really about these people doing 10 times the amount of job, and similarly, and you can take that to infinity. So thank you very much. Thanks for your time and thanks for coming in. And to all the audience who ever joined, thank you. And we'll circulate this as we go forward. Just to kind of end up, as we move to the last bit of the presentation, I wanted to thank you. We'll be back in about a fortnight's time. I will publish the dates and as well as the topic. We're going to look at a key sector in India. Most in all probability, we are looking at banking and financial services, and I'll have a couple of very interesting people, global as well as from India, who are going to talk about how generative AI is going to impact banking, which is a huge industry, both from a B2B and a B2C standpoint. Thanks, Sindhu. Thanks, Jagdish. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye
Thank
then.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.